We need to leverage all the learnings that we've had, and there's no reason for us to go completely back. I think there's like a balance to things. It's like, yeah, we've proved a few things that worked. We failed along the way, but that was a learning. And now there's an opportunity for us to innovate. And how do we continue pushing forward?
Life is an endless stream of challenges, but no worries. Manuj is bringing the world's best minds right here for you.
My gosh, Manuj, you just blew my mind.
Thank you, universe. Manuj, thank you.
I'm so grateful.
It makes me feel a bit better.
Thank you.
Bootstrapping your dreams is here to give you what you need to succeed.
Hello and welcome to this new episode of Bootstrapping Your Dreams Show. I'm your host, Manuj Aggarwal, and today we'll be talking with Nadia Hansen. So Nadia is the Chief Information Officer for Clark County in Las Vegas, Nevada. Clark County is an $8 billion public enterprise, which is the nation's 11th largest county, providing extensive regional services to more than 2.4 million citizens and more than 45.6 million visitors a year. Nadia's portfolio also includes McCarran International Airport, the nation's ninth busiest airport, and University Medical Center, the state's largest public hospital. As the leader of the IT function at Clark County, Nadia is responsible for delivering all information technology needs to 10,000 employees across 140 locations. Nadia is directly responsible for the leadership and management of 3 counties' IT operations and program delivery. She also sits on the regional leadership team with the CEO, CFO, and CIO. In her role, Nadia participates in all RFPs across the regions, designing the technology solution components for those engagements and delivering the strategy proposal to the clients. Nadia has more than 20 years of experience leading and developing technology functions for large organizations and startups. Nadia serves as an advisory board member for several government tech organizations. Nadia ensures that the IT organization is reimagining citizen services by leading the way in platforms, cloud-supported applications, digitizing business services, and data analytics. She led the land development system implementation, one of the largest technology projects in Clark County, automating dozens of manual processes, reining in counties' planning and permitting costs, coordinating across 12 business units. Prior to her role, Nadia has held many leadership and technology roles across casino gaming, IT consulting, and business intelligence verticals. Welcome, Nadia.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here. Hi, everyone.
Yeah, so nice to have you. And this is an amazing list of accomplishments. I would like to get into it and learn a little bit about your journey. How did you get here? How, tell us a little bit about how you got into IT. I mean, that itself is a huge challenge, being in IT as a female, because I'm in IT and I know how difficult it is.
Yeah, happy to share. So I'll give a quick little background about where I came from. So we'll start there. Yeah. So I was raised in a multicultural, multilingual household in Karachi, Pakistan, and my family used to move a lot. So I happened to have the privilege of experiencing living in different countries before settling in Las Vegas in the US. So when I lived in Dubai, which is really like the New York of UAE, that's how I think of it. I noticed that the residents lived a very fast-paced life. And so the entire city was built around quick and accessible services. And then I lived there for a little bit. And before then, I moved to London. And then the reliability of the buses and the underground tubes was impeccable. So there was all these places that really helped shape who I am today. And it was funny because when I moved to Las Vegas, I went to the DMV for my state ID card. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a long process. Like, what can we do about this? So it's really how I got interested into government services. It's really by seeing how governments operate in all these different countries and how much government is part of our daily lives.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So really at that point, I mean, I recognized that I wanted to be in a role where I could make the greatest impact on the largest number of people. And that's what drew me to public service and using tech for good. So coming back to a little bit like why and how. So, I consider myself as an accidental CIO. My background is actually in arts. So I was an art major. I was working towards, getting a textile design degree. And then I moved here to Las Vegas and I realized I'm going to die hungry. Like there's no way, there's no way that an artist can make any kind of money, like, and so it's kind of funny because I pivoted towards computer science more from a, this is maybe the future. This is where we need to be. And I kind of did my degree from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas in computer science. So it's funny because I'd never planned to be where I am at today. I think it was just a series of situations, circumstances, kind of learning along the way of what I like, what I don't like, where I want to be, which kind of led me to where I am today.
That's amazing. So one thing that jumps out at me is like, as you said, like you lived in different parts of the world, you experienced different ways of doing things and different cultures. How did that help? Did that help sort of open up your mind as compared to, a lot of people who may not have had that sort of a colorful experience of humanity across the world?
No, absolutely. I feel that traveling, I think if there's any advice that we take out of this, the entire thing is travel is super important. When things open up again and we're somewhat back normalish, honestly, travel opens up a whole new world. You get to meet different cultures. You get to see how people experience things. And you get to, if you ever have the opportunity, if you're a young student, please go out and do an exchange program in any other country other than the one that you're in. Because it really allows you to grow on your mindset and to really learn kind of the different ways that people live and how you interact with people. Honestly, I feel like that really shaped who I am too and how I think about things. And, when people bring things up, like, I was in Karachi, Pakistan. It was a very, very tumultuous time when I was there. And, the way I think about things is like, am I being like held at gunpoint? That's a problem. If I'm not being held at gunpoint, that's a good day. Like I'm alive, things are well, right? So I have a different perspective on things. And I feel like that is what allows you to kind of learn about different cultures and really see what are, when we joke about first world problems and other problems, right? Some of the things you think about, it's like, there are people who are like starving for water and starving for food. And we're in a very fortunate time where we have access to all these different things in life. So it kind of helps bring that perspective into play.
Absolutely. No, I second that for sure. I grew up in India, similar to Pakistan, and I've traveled extensively, and it opens up your mind to not only just sort of understand other people, but how to communicate with them. And as you said, like different situations, you can have a better perspective. Like, one of the things I notice is a lot of people solve problems across the world in different ways. So if you get to learn how they are solving the problem, it actually works really well, where you can sort of, just take that solution and implement in a different scenario, and things move along very quickly. So it's almost like plagiarizing other people's solutions.
Isn't it? What's the saying? Imitation is the best form of flattery. If somebody's already done it, why do the rework? I think that's part of it. And just on the childhood stuff that we're talking about, I remember the day crystal clear. Like I told my mom, I'm not going to be a doctor, I'm not going to be an engineer, and I'm not going to be a lawyer. Those are the three things. And I was like, I'm not going to be any of those. And can you imagine, like, coming from the part of the world that we're from, how disappointing that was. So it's just funny. Like I go back and I think about my roots and think about, how the growth has happened. And it's funny. Those are some of the things I wanted to fix. Right. And she always said, you're going to go work for government. Yeah, it's going to be great. Like, that's the place you want to be, because all the things that you roll your eyes about and you complain about, let's go fix it. Right.
Absolutely. So this is great. And I can relate to your comment about parents. Like, I had disappointed my parents as well. But things work out, if you follow your heart, things work out. So now let's talk about IT. So, technology obviously is scary to a lot of people, and they, I work with some executives and high-level decision makers, and they haven't used a computer other than just browsing the internet and sending emails, and they are always scared, if I press the wrong button, something will happen. But it actually gives you enormous power as well to reach millions and millions of people and sort of help solve their problems. What is your take on how well we understand technology at different levels, especially at the higher level of decision making, in decision making roles? How well do the executives and decision makers understand the power of technology and how to utilize it properly to serve humanity?
Yeah. So COVID has been a terrible human tragedy globally.
Yeah.
But perhaps the only silver lining that came out of it was the ability for us to adapt as humans and using technology and having it be an enabler for us. So prior to COVID, it was almost like dragging a sandbag up a hill, right? You have so many different stakeholders at so many different levels. And as a technology department, your customer is everybody. Your customer is the internal customer. Your customer is the departments. Your customer might be all the external stakeholders, your constituents, your residents, pretty much anybody who touches the system, right? And I feel like there has been a major transformation that has taken place since COVID, because now I think there's an appetite to take risks. There's an appetite there was no playbook for it. So everybody was just, you're trying to figure stuff out together as a community, as a nation. And I think that has really helped drive a lot of the success with using technology, right? So, did we ever think that the way we work, the way we live, the way we interact is going to change so dramatically? For those of us with kids, did we ever think that the traditional school or university setting would become 100% virtual, right? And that we as humans, we'll just adapt to it because that's what we're given. We don't have a choice, and that goes for telehealth, that goes for telework, that goes for virtual courts, that goes for virtual meetings, that goes for virtual weddings. We've been having weddings online where you have and you have 3 Zoom meetings happening. So really the reshaping and rethinking the way that we conduct business has really been enabled now since COVID. So I think I wanted to bring that into play because prior to that, I think if you asked me that question pre-March of 2020, my answer would have been completely different. But we're at a very critical point now in transformation where we need to leverage all the learnings that we've had, and there's no reason for us to go completely back. I think there's like a balance to things. It's like, we've proved a few things that worked. We failed along the way, but that was a learning. And now there's an opportunity for us to innovate. And how do we continue pushing forward?
Yeah, no, that's well said. And I do completely agree. I think I always say, decades of digitization efforts were compressed into like 3 weeks. And we were all forced to, challenge our beliefs. But here is a flip side of what I see as well. When I used to sit in the boardrooms and talk about these high-level IT strategies, we used to get a lot of pushback about privacy, security, and we used to get this pushback from people who not necessarily knew what they were objecting to. They just knew that this is an area that is of concern. And there was a lot of resistance to understand that area. What does privacy mean? What does security mean? Because, one of the examples that I give is a lot of people who were opposed to doing these things online, they were happy to plug in their laptop into the free Wi-Fi at Starbucks or the airport, not understanding that is the biggest security risk to what they are trying to do. So I think those belief systems, those resistance sort of came down because of the urgency. And I hope in the long term, we recognize that when we face resistance, it's basically just a belief that somebody's not letting go. Is that what do you say to that?
I think somewhat. I agree with you, Manuj. And I also there's like a component of awareness and education, right? So if we come in with saying, you have to do this, that's a completely different conversation than let me show you and co-create the solution with you, right?
Yeah.
We're not doing this to you. we're doing it with you. And it's a completely different conversation. So I think kind of bringing these different stakeholders and having a constant conversation with them, and not just making it where I'm going to do this to you, otherwise, you know what, you're not going to have anything. And those conversations just don't work. That was just legacy mindset, and those conversations always die. So I think it's really trying to bring everybody on board with you, and there's a big awareness component of it. How do you educate people? I think there's an education perspective, which we're really trying to help here at a county level too, by launching like a cybersecurity program, just saying, here's the things that you don't need to know this at work, but even at home, when you access your banking system, there's some of the things you need to be aware of, right? So kind of bring it back to everyday life that you're using to bring that kind of and help resonate it with people.
Yeah, no, this is great. I do agree, and I hope this openness and this sort of just awareness about these issues, it continues to stay on top of mind for our decision makers. Shifting gears a little bit now, I also know that you are also an entrepreneur besides being a public service in public service. So tell us a little bit about that experience. How did you start that venture, and what prompted you to get into entrepreneurship?
Yeah. So, I mentioned earlier, I've been always attracted to public service. And I realized at one point when I really disappointed my mother about being a software developer, she's like, this is what you really want to do. We're an entrepreneurial family. Why wouldn't you want to start your own business? And so there was a little bit of pressure on that. And then I finally figured, well, I have nothing to lose, right? I was still pretty young. I was like, I have options. If this doesn't work out, I'm going to go back into the job space. And so I really felt strongly about starting my own consulting company, but it was really geared towards helping public sector. And it was kind of taking everything that I learned. I started my career in a tech startup, and really the foundational things, which was, no job is too big or too small. So if you want to do it, give it 110% and just go for it. And I really felt like that sort of helped in my entrepreneurial journey, which was really trying to figure out what is it that I want to do, what would make the greatest impact on people. And it really gravitated me towards public service the entire time.
You are listening to Bootstrapping Your Dreams Show with Manuj Aggarwal. Businesses face numerous challenges like finding the right product market fit, determining the market size, implementing a winning go-to-market strategy, crafting customer-centric USP, competitive analysis, looking for funding, building up cash flow and profitability. We have made a lot of free resources available to the entrepreneurial community, including this podcast. We invite you to check out our websites and follow us on social channels. The links are in the show notes. We hope you find the resources useful and utilize them to grow your business. We also have some programs for entrepreneurs. If you find our content useful, then you will definitely find the programs outstanding. So do check them out. That's great. So naturally, my next follow-up question is like, what are the biggest sort of contrasting things you experienced or found between being an entrepreneur and being in public service?
I love that question. I'm smiling because this is like one of the talks that I give all the time. And it's about having an entrepreneurial mindset in government. So essentially the difference between a startup and government, there's only a few things. We're both very customer obsessed, right? We both want to be as nimble as possible. And we both kind of look at risks and see what we can do to mitigate them, right? So there's some similarities, there's some differences. The public sector, obviously very heavily policies, legislation, regulation heavy. But I think the biggest difference is the ability to be agile or nimble. And I think, what does that mean from a culture standpoint? What does that mean from a leadership standpoint? And what does that mean from your workforce standpoint? I think that's probably the biggest difference, because you're going through so many channels. You have so many different levels that you go through. Startups are kind of like, entrepreneur journey. You can flatten it out because you run the show. Yeah. But I think when you're in a government organization, you have to go through the levels of hierarchy because it's just set up in that way. So I think, how can you bring that mindset, though, to continue thinking about failing forward? I think that's one of the big things, where startups take the risks and they're like, let me just fail quickly and then pivot and move forward. In public sector, that's a big risk, because if you fail, you're failing very publicly and it's very visible. So how do you kind of find that balance? I think that's a little bit tricky, and we constantly try to get better at it.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's a very good point. Like, failing publicly is something that people don't want to do, but maybe if it becomes a little bit normal and people, it doesn't get punished that heavily, maybe the people will be more open to taking risk. Or maybe I can just say, according to your career and your experience, giving an opportunity for everyone to actually run their own business before they join public service may be another way to encourage that.
I highly recommend for anybody who's student, undergrads, graduates, I would highly recommend going and working in a startup. It doesn't have to be a tech startup. It just needs to be a startup. Really what that teaches you is you're going to be wearing multiple hats. So you're going to be thinking about, I was hired as an IT person, but now I have to do branding. I have to do marketing. I have to do sales. I have to do all of these different roles that I wasn't hired for. But it's okay, because you get to learn at that point. And I really feel that that's foundational to whatever you do in your life.
Yeah, no, that's very good advice. So travel and join a startup. So, that's the now, let's talk about how do you manage this behemoth? Like, you have a huge responsibility, and obviously there's never enough resources. There's never enough time. There's never enough people. So how do you prioritize? Where do the resources go, given you have so many different priorities to take care of?
Yeah, so one of the first things that we've done here at Clark County, we recently published a technology roadmap. And really that roadmap aligns to what are the county's goals, right? So the county's goals have to do with digital engagement. How can we be more proactive with our residents and with our constituents? It has to do with employee engagement. How do we build leaders from within? And it has to do with building strategic partnerships to build an innovation ecosystem, right? So now that we have like a framework, that this is like our big objectives, everything that we go falls under that. So anything that we look into priorities, how can we prioritize, our data analytics program? Which bucket does it fall into? So I feel like you need to have a very a public-facing roadmap where you can bring the mission and vision and all the people along with you, and then you prioritize accordingly based on how that falls into your goals and objectives. So I think it's kind of like a two-step approach, and without that you don't really have a plan. If you don't know where you're headed, then any path will do, but I think in this case you kind of need a path.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a very good advice, sort of think before you leap. But then again, my follow-up will be, how do you handle the contingency, especially like big crisis moments like March 2020? I mean, we can have all the plans laid out, but they go out for a toss when something like this happens. So how do you handle a situation like that?
So it's funny, and I was talking to my team about this in a different debriefing exercise, but we were talking about, we're so good at crisis management. I call this crisis management because it's all hands on deck. Everybody comes forward. They're like, you know what, we're going to make sure that we get to whatever we need to. Because I think that's just part of who we are as technologists. We all want to fix things, right? But I think the bigger question is, how can we be better prepared? So for instance, with the pandemic, we were very fortunate that we were already on this mobility, automation sort of priority. That was part of what we were doing, having a mobile workforce. And so we were, agile enough to purchase devices and have laptops and kind of be ready for it. There's a lot of organizations that weren't. So I think coming back to your question, there won't be an answer for everything. There won't be a plan for everything. But how we address it as a team, and I think that has to do with leadership. We're staying calm. We're going through the motions and saying, okay, what are the different risks associated with it, and kind of weighing the pros and cons for everything. It really helps align us towards, okay, we are making calculated decisions, and if it ends up being a mistake, it was a savvy mistake. It was not a sloppy misstep. right? A sloppy misstep is when you just don't make any calculated decisions. You're going off of no facts and you're just doing something. So I think it's really coming back to, okay, have we thought of everything that we possibly can? There's a lot of subject matter experts here, right? My team is fantastic. I always talk about my team first because they're the ones who are the driving force. I just happen to be here, the talking person, but really they're the ones who are the doers in the organization. So it's really important to get feedback from people and say, well, what do you think? How best can we approach it? And I think that feedback loop is really important in times of crisis.
That's for sure, and that speaks to your leadership style, and that's rare. So that's great. Now let me ask a follow-up question on that. How do you cultivate that culture? How do you build a team? Just finding good people is challenge enough. Then it is how do you motivate them? How do you retain them? How do you give them the freedom to sort of express their own ideas? And then there's communication, internal communication, external communication. How do you put all that together to build a comprehensive sort of a environment for a flourishing team who can execute at that level?
Yeah, so this is definitely work in progress. I will say it's an evolution, right? It takes years and years and years, especially in a governmental entity that's like, hundreds of years old. It's kind of trying to steer the Titanic, and you can't just do it in a day, and it's not overnight. But I'm a firm believer that starts at the top. So I've been very fortunate. Our CEO and my boss, the CEO, they're very open to ideas. They're very communicative, and I can go back with them and kind of have an open conversation. And I feel like I've been trying to do that with my teams as well. So since the pandemic, one of the best things that could have happened to us is the communication. We meet every day. We do like a quick daily stand-up, 15 minutes. What's happening? How are you feeling? That's the first question. Let's talk about us first before we dive into everything else that's happening, and kind of just get a temperature check. And since then, that's been flowing down to the rest of the teams. So having an open door policy, but now it's a virtual open door, having that freedom to be able to, speak with your leaders. I try to do virtual office hours with the team where once a month we just, come and hang out and ask any questions or just chat about where we're headed. But it's really having that open communication sort of forum makes a difference. Now you got to remember, so you mentioned Clark County, McCarran, UMC. So those are all under the county umbrella, but they're not directly under the IT purview. They have their own IT teams. Sure. We have decentralized
of course.
Across. But really part of that is having leadership who supports you, and you being the leader yourself. I started the trenches here. So I was a programmer at the county 15 years ago when I started my career. And honestly, everything that I've learned going from that is like, how can I have access to people who I can talk to? So it's really providing that accessibility, but it takes time. Like I mentioned, this is not overnight. There's a lot of different past leaders, who have improved as they went on. So it's just kind of taking it one step at a time and really asking the people, what is it that they need to be recognized, to feel good, to feel like they've communicated in a very sort of strict, regulated environment.
That's great. That's awesome. Now, one question I always ask is, we are going through, or we have gone through a huge sort of public health crisis as a species. It's not over yet, and I believe there will be some fallout coming out of this even after everything is over, at least economically. So, what are in your view? You also mentioned that you have change to virtual work environment and whatnot, and being in one of the busiest cities in the world, what are some of the long-term changes you can foresee that will happen, whether it comes to how we work, how we collaborate, how we communicate? What are some of your views around that?
Yeah, I'm actually very excited about the future of Clark County. One has to do with we're the 11th largest county, and I think hopefully we're going to be moving more towards the top 10. And the reason being, we have no state income tax. So a lot of the people in bordering states like California, Utah, Arizona, they're all kind of rethinking, okay, I'm not happy with where I'm at. Can I live somewhere else and still work from the work from anywhere environment? So we're seeing a lot of influx from people coming into Nevada. which is actually very exciting. It's great for economic development, and that really helps with the tech ecosystem that we're trying to put together. So that's one. And two, one of the biggest things that I think that has come out of COVID from a technology standpoint is, how do people access us? So they go to our website, and on our website, we have over 100 online services. How can we make those services easier and then more intuitive, where we don't have to ask you 100 times for your login because you're going into 100 different portals? Let's just try to streamline that and maybe have some single sign-on or like a digital identity that you can come to. So we're really moving more towards those forward thinking, making it easier for our residents to be able to access services, and kind of thinking more along what a user-centric design looks like in everything that we do. I think it's really come to the forefront of where the gaps are and how can we better improve it.
That's great. And so what about some of the additional services, like, things like touchless payment systems? I mean, do you see that? This is just an example that is coming to me right now, but what are some of the other things that we can foresee that technology will be able to help us sort of tackle or help improve our lives in some ways?
I see a lot more autonomous cars happening. So I don't know if you know, but Nevada was the first state in the nation to approve a law that authorized self-driving cars.
Oh,
Nevada
wow.
was also the first state that allowed the testing of autonomous cars on public roads. So we're going to see a lot more of that. I think the Boring Company has a huge investment here to kind of build a tunnel to help, cart visitors who are coming in from one place to another. So that's more along the climate sustainability sort of goals that we've got. So there's really going to be a big push towards the contactless, like you mentioned, more towards the climate side of things. Internally here, we're trying to go paperless. We've implemented electronic signatures. I haven't seen paper. I haven't signed paper in the last 8 months, which has been fantastic. So we went completely paperless there. I mean, there's just so many good things that are happening. And I think there's a forward momentum towards technology that we just haven't seen before. So this is probably like the best time for us to leverage it.
That's awesome. That's great. And so one of the last questions I want to ask is, once again, I see there's a gap when it comes to women entrepreneurship and women in IT. Listeners who are females, like, what will you say to them? What is the message you can give to them to jump into entrepreneurship and startups and IT and help us take this forward?
I want everybody who's listening, including females who are listening to this. This is very important. There's a speech that was written by Martin Luther King, and he spoke to a group of students in 1967. It's called My Life as a Blueprint. All you have to do is Google it and it'll come up. And it's a very short, like less than a page speech that he gave. And I printed it and I have it at my desk and I read it every day and I show it to my daughters as well. So there's amazing key takeaways in it, but the ones I want to talk about is don't allow anybody to make you feel that you're nobody. Always feel that you count, and always feel that you have worth, and always feel that your life has ultimate significance. I think that was part of the key message of Martin Luther King's speech, and I think of it every day. And I think if you have that mindset, we're like, I can do this. Don't be afraid to take risks. Just jump in it and find out. You're early on in your careers or lives, where you have the leverage, you have the time, you have the bandwidth to try new things. And I think don't be afraid to try it out.
That's very well said. Good thoughts. Thank you so much. Now, before I let you go, can you tell us if people want to connect with you, they want to reach out, how can they do that?
I do not have any social media except for LinkedIn. So please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Shoot me a note. I do respond. It takes me a little while, but I definitely will respond back. And awesome. I would love to see if this was useful. Hopefully people enjoyed it.
Awesome. We'll put that link in the show notes so that people can reach out easily.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me today.
No, thank you so much. It was a lovely conversation. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Sarah, producer of the Bootstrapping Your Dreams show. This episode has come to an end. Don't forget to check out the episode show notes for the links to the resources mentioned in this episode. Thanks for tuning in. Until the next episode, goodbye. Keep going and keep winning.